from my house!
They spent 40 years building a home with love, sacrifice, and silence. And in one cold afternoon, their own son locked the door behind them. 2 suitcases, one final look at the house they raised him in, and a sentence that shattered their hearts. You don't belong here anymore. But what their son didn't know was that beneath that very house lay a secret meant to be found only when everything was lost. Backhand index pointing right stay till the end, because this ending changes everything. The house had seen everything. Every birthday candle blown out in its kitchen. Every fever cooled by a mother's trembling hand. Every late night a father waited by the door, pretending not to worry. But that morning, the walls listened in silence. Their son stood in the living room with papers in his hand, his voice calm, too calm. Numbers, offers, timelines. He spoke like a stranger negotiating a deal, not like the boy who once slept on their chest during thunderstorms. We can't keep doing this, he said, avoiding their eyes. This house is worth a lot. You're old now. It's time. Time. The mother's fingers tightened around the edge of her shawl. The father straightened his back, the way he had done his whole life, when dignity was the only thing left to protect. They didn't argue. They remembered the nights he cried from hunger, and the father skipped meals so his son could eat. They remembered the mother selling her jewelry, one piece at a time, to pay school fees. They remembered building this house brick by brick, dreaming it would one day shelter generations. But memories don't speak in courtrooms, and love doesn't appear on property documents. You'll be better off in a nursing home, the son continued, his tone practical, rehearsed. They'll take care of you. I can't slow my life down anymore. A burden. The word landed heavier than the suitcases they were told to pack. The mother looked around the room one last time, the faded family photos, the crack in the wall she had always meant to fix. The father nodded once, not in agreement, but in surrender. They walked out quietly. No shouting, no curses, just silence, the kind that carries decades of unspoken sacrifice. Behind them, the door closed. Inside the house, the son exhaled in relief, already planning the sale. Outside, 2 elderly parents stood on the pavement, holding hands like they had on their wedding day. Only now, love was all they had left, and neither of them knew that this forced goodbye was only the beginning. They were given one night to gather a lifetime into boxes, to decide which memories were worth carrying and which would be left behind with the walls that no longer wanted them. The backyard was quiet, the same backyard where their son had learned to ride a bicycle, falling, crying, getting up again because his father refused to let him quit. The same patch of earth where his mother once planted a small lemon tree, believing roots made a house feel alive. Now it felt like a farewell. The father stepped outside to collect an old wooden crate. His knees ached as he bent down, his breath heavy with exhaustion and something deeper, loss. His shoe struck something solid, a dull, hollow sound. He paused. He tapped the ground again with his foot. Not soil, not rock, something different. Did you hear that? He called softly. The mother joined him, worry etched into her tired face. The father knelt slowly and brushed away dry leaves and dirt with his trembling hands. Beneath the dust was a stone, smooth, flat, and strangely out of place. Why is this loose? The mother whispered. They pressed on it together. The stone shifted. A narrow gap opened, releasing a breath of cold air from below, as if the earth itself had been holding a secret for decades. They stared at each other, shock freezing them in place. How did we never see this? The father murmured. With effort, they lifted the stone completely. Beneath it was a dark opening, just wide enough for a person to descend. Stone steps spiraled downward, disappearing into blackness. Fear arrived first. The mother clutched her husband's arm. What if it's dangerous? What if it collapses? The father said nothing. He was thinking of his own father, of stories told in whispers, of a time when families hid things underground during uncertainty, of secrets buried to protect, not to forget. He found an old flashlight in the shed. It flickered to life weak but determined like them. "If we're leaving this place forever," he said quietly, "we should know all of it." They stood at the edge of the opening, hearts pounding. For a moment, the fear of the unknown battled the fear of having nothing left. Then the father took the first step. The stone stairs were cold beneath his feet. The air grew thicker, quieter, as if sound itself was afraid to follow them down. The mother followed closely, her hand never leaving his shoulder. The flashlight revealed stone walls carved by hand, old craftsmanship, patient and deliberate. This wasn't an accident. Someone had built this carefully, intentionally. At the bottom, the passage opened into a small underground room. Their breath caught. Shelves lined the walls. Wooden chests sat undisturbed, sealed by time. Dust lay heavy, untouched for generations. On one wall, faded markings were carved, symbols of ownership, family, and protection. The father opened the nearest chest. Inside were gold coins, wrapped in cloth that had once been white. Beneath them, handwritten letters tied with string. Deeds, names, dates. The mother sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face, not from greed, but from realization. This was meant for us," she whispered. "Not money, not wealth. Proof. Proof that this house had deeper roots than any sale contract. Proof that their family story was bigger than one son's decision." For the first time since being cast out, hope stirred in their chests. They weren't just elderly parents with nowhere to go. They were guardians of a legacy, one hidden in plain sight. And as they stood in the glow of that flickering flashlight, surrounded by secrets waiting to be understood, they realized something powerful. They had been pushed out of their home, but the house had just opened its heart to them. The underground room felt heavier now, not because of the air, but because of what it held. The father sat on the cold stone floor, the chest open before him, his hands hovering as if he were afraid the truth might disappear if he touched it too firmly. The mother knelt beside him, carefully lifting one bundle of papers after another, her fingers tracing the edges like they were fragile memories. Letters, dozens of them. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded but firm, written by men who believed words could protect the future. The handwriting was careful, deliberate, the kind that came from people who knew the value of truth. The father unfolded the first letter and began to read aloud. It was written by his grandfather. The date stopped his breath. Decades ago, the letter spoke of land, of boundaries drawn by rivers and old trees, not by surveyor lines or city maps. It spoke of trust placed in the wrong hands, of neighbors who promised to manage what the family could not during difficult times. The mother's eyes widened. "They said our land was small," she whispered. "They said we barely owned this house." The father turned the page. Maps slid out, hand-drawn, detailed, precise. Not just one plot, not just one house. Fields, underground water access, a pathway leading far beyond the backyard, connecting to land that stretched wider than they had ever imagined. This can't be right," the mother said, her voice trembling. But the maps matched the carvings on the underground wall. The symbols, the measurements, everything aligned. They weren't standing under just a house. They were standing at the center of something far bigger. The next letter carried the truth, like a quiet confession. Their family had been cheated. When their grandfather fell, ill, trusted associates had taken advantage of his absence. Papers were altered. Boundaries were quietly redrawn. Taxes were manipulated. The family was told their land was mostly gone. Gone. Yet here it was, hidden underground, waiting patiently for the right moment to speak. The father leaned back against the stone wall, his chest tight. "All those years," he said softly. "All those sacrifices." He remembered working double shifts, borrowing money, saying no to small joys, so their son could have everything. They were never poor. They were unaware. The mother covered her mouth, tears falling freely now, not from grief, but from the shock of stolen destiny. "All those nights I prayed," she said, her voice breaking. "I thought we were being tested." She looked at her husband, a slow, painful smile forming through tears. "We were being protected." Another document lay beneath the maps, a legal deed sealed with an old stamp. It bore their family name. Not altered, not erased, preserved. This land, it's still legally ours, the father whispered, disbelief turning into clarity. They tried to bury it, not erase it. Silence filled the room, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was full of meaning. The father thought of his son, of the words burden and waste spoken so easily, of the cold certainty with which he had tried to sell what he didn't understand. Fate had been patient. Their family story had waited underground, untouched by greed, until the moment it was needed most. This isn't about money, the mother said quietly. It's about truth finding its way back. They gathered the documents carefully, as if handling a sleeping child. Every paper felt like a piece of time returning home. As they climbed back toward the surface, the night air felt different, lighter. The house above them was the same, but they were not. They had entered the passage as victims of rejection. They emerged as heirs to a destiny that had been hidden, not lost. For the first time in years, the father stood taller. The mother's steps were steadier. They didn't know yet how this truth would unfold. But one thing was clear. They had not been abandoned by life. Life had been waiting for them to discover who they truly were. The truth rarely arrives with applause. Sometimes it walks into a room quietly, carried in trembling hands, wrapped in old paper, and dismissed by those who no longer believe in anything but profit. When the parents told their son about the passage, the documents, the land, he laughed. A sharp, hollow laugh. "This is ridiculous," he said, leaning back in his chair, scrolling through his phone. "Old papers? Hand-drawn maps? You really think this changes anything?" The father placed the documents on the table carefully, as if rough handling might insult their history. The mother stood beside him, silent but firm. "We just want you to look," the father said. "Just read." The son didn't touch them. "You've been confused since the beginning," he replied coldly. "You should be grateful I even found you a good nursing home." The words stung more this time, not because they hurt, but because they confirmed something painful. Greed had already chosen its side. Within days, the son listed the house again. He dismissed the underground discovery as fantasy, telling real estate agents his parents were emotional, unstable, desperate for attention. The whispers began. People smiled politely and nodded, but behind closed doors they laughed. Old people, losing their minds, chasing imaginary treasure. Then the parents took the documents to a lawyer. The young assistant at the front desk glanced at the papers, unimpressed. The older attorney behind her, however, went very still. He adjusted his glasses. "Where did you get these?" he asked quietly. The father told him everything. The hidden stone, the passage, the maps, the letters. The lawyer didn't laugh. He stood up, locked the door, and spread the papers across his desk like puzzle pieces long separated. "These deeds," he said slowly, "were never legally dissolved." The room seemed to breathe. He traced a boundary line with his finger. "This land extends beyond your backyard." He pointed again. "And into your neighbor's property." The neighbor, a respected man, well-connected, comfortable. The same man who had once offered to help their family when times were hard. The legal notice arrived like thunder. The neighbor denied everything at first, called it a mistake, an error, a misunderstanding. Then the surveyors arrived. Then the records were compared. Then the lies had nowhere left to hide. The stolen land wasn't small. It was vast. The courtroom filled quickly when the case began. Curiosity turned into skepticism. Skepticism turned into quiet judgment. People watched the elderly couple walk in slowly, holding hands. Some shook their heads. "This won't last," someone whispered. "They don't stand a chance." The son sat across the room, arms crossed, jaw tight, not beside his parents, but opposite them. When asked to testify, he shrugged. "My parents are confused," he said. "They've been like this for years." The mother lowered her eyes. The father closed his briefly, then opened them with calm resolve. One by one, the documents were presented. The letters read aloud. The maps projected onto large screens. The surveyor spoke next, clear, professional, undeniable. Boundary lines didn't care about laughter. Truth didn't age. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the reality settled in. The neighbor's face drained of color. He fumbled his words, contradicted himself, reached for excuses that no longer fit. The judge leaned forward. "This land was unlawfully occupied," he said, "for decades." Silence followed. The son stared at the evidence, his confidence unraveling. The room he once controlled now refused to listen to him. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered. The story spread quickly. How two elderly parents, dismissed and discarded, had uncovered a buried truth that exposed years of greed. Still, doubt lingered. People asked why it took so long, why they didn't fight earlier. The answer was simple. They never knew they had something to defend. The battle wasn't easy. Hearings dragged on. Delays tested their strength. But every attempt to bury the truth only revealed it more clearly. Because truth doesn't need allies. It only needs time. And as the courtroom doors closed behind them once again, the parents realized something profound. They had lost their son to greed, but they had found justice in the most unexpected place, waiting patiently exactly where it had been hidden all along. The final ruling came on a quiet morning. No crowds, no shouting, just a judge's steady voice reading the truth that had waited decades to be heard. The documents were authentic. The maps were accurate. The land belonged to them. Every word fell like a weight lifted. The court ordered the restoration of all unlawfully occupied property. Compensation was awarded not as charity but as correction. Years of loss were finally acknowledged, measured, and returned. The father closed his eyes as the decision was read. Not in triumph, but in relief. The mother squeezed his hand, her tears silent, controlled. This was not a victory they had imagined celebrating. It was simply justice arriving on time. Across the room, their son sat frozen. The confidence that once filled his posture was gone. No anger now, no arrogance. Only the quiet realization that power built on ignorance cannot stand against truth. The judge addressed him directly. "You acted without knowledge," he said firmly, "and without respect. There were no handcuffs, no public humiliation, just exposure. That was punishment enough." Outside the courthouse, reporters waited for a dramatic reaction. A statement, an accusation, a declaration of revenge. The parents offered none. "We only wanted what was ours," the father said calmly, "and to be left in peace." They returned to the house, not as owners reclaiming property, but as caretakers reclaiming meaning. The backyard felt warmer now. The hidden stone remained open, no longer a secret, but a reminder. Neighbors who once doubted them now watched in silence. Some apologized, some looked away. The son came later that evening. He stood at the gate, hesitant, smaller somehow. "I didn't know," he said quietly. I thought I was being practical." The mother looked at him for a long moment, the child she raised, the man he became, the distance between them. "We know," she replied gently. "That's what hurt the most. They did not throw him out. They did not lecture him. They simply didn't hand him the keys. Forgiveness, they understood, is not the same as access." As the sun set, the father and mother sat together on the porch. No plans of luxury, no desire for revenge, just peace earned through patience. They had been kicked out. They had been forgotten. But, in the end, dignity outlived power. And the secret passage that changed everything was never just underground. It was inside them all along. This wasn't a story about revenge. It was a story about truth waiting patiently, about parents who lost everything and found something greater than wealth, their dignity. Sometimes life breaks you only to lead you to what was always meant to be yours. If this story moved you, share and subscribe for more powerful stories where justice whispers, but always arrives.